Oh, how sweet. I absolutely love decor fashion. I think I'll have to make a decor doll at some point. Maybe next year.
At Sky the Golden One. Yas! Do it!
Well, I guess I have to make a decor doll now. Hello my dolly dearies and welcome to another video. Thank you to the lovely Delightful for voicing that intro line. Link to her socials will be in the description box below. Today, as you may have seen from the intro skit and thumbnail, we're making a Decora doll. But not just any Decora doll, a Decora dragon. I've been wanting to make a doll with loads of body mods and cool stuff for a while now, as well as a Decora doll. So I decided, why not fuse them together and make the coolest Candi Decora doll ever? For this doll, we're going to be using Claudia as a base. I feel her toothy, happy smile goes perfectly for a dragon. She is a big sister body type, meaning she is taller and meatier than the other Monster High dolls. And with all that said and done, let's get on with the video. I'm very excited to start working on this doll, so let's get started. To start off, we're going to want to remove all of her hair. To do this, you can take some small, sharp scissors and chop as closely to the head as possible. Since this hair is in very good condition, I want to try save it and maybe use it on another doll. And you also want to have as short stubs left as possible, because that makes it a lot easier when you're scraping all of the hair out from the insides of the doll's head. When going to the middle of the head, it can get very difficult to keep it very short, but just try to cut each plug individually. Therefore, you can save as much hair as possible. Now that her hair is left in all the short little stubs, we can remove her head. To do this, place your doll into some boiling water. This will soften the vinyl, giving you more pull and means you can remove the head, and there is less chance of the neck peg getting damaged in this process. Make sure to use a towel or dishcloth so you don't burn your hand. Now that the head's been all removed, we can take our needle nose pliers and start scraping around the head to remove all of the gunky hair. For this doll, the hair was really gunky and very tough to get out. So a lot of hand cramp and pain, but I eventually got there. But then I found that I couldn't actually scrape it through the neck hole. So I decided to remove her ears first and pull her hair through the cut ear holes. To remove the ears, take a craft knife and slowly cut away from you to minimise the chance of injury. And with both of the ears removed, I take my pliers and reach into the ear holes to pull out all of the gunky hair. It was all very tough and manky, and if anybody has a way to loosen up all of the hair gunk and make it much easier to remove, please do tell me, leave a link to a video or any tips that you guys have, and any would be so greatly appreciated. But with all of that hair gunk removed, we can put it in the bin and never think of how horrible it is again. And get onto the next step, which is removing all of the face paint. To do this, take your 100% acetone and put it on toilet paper, a cotton swab or cotton blobs, and wipe off the face. And now that her face is all clean, we can get started on the rest of the doll. I decided to save the face up till last and do all the body modifications first. I drew a quick concept sketch of what I wanted it to look like. And I wanted to keep it quite free, not very concrete. I could change what I wanted, when I wanted, and it was quite free, nothing was set in stone. But to start off, we need to give her a back joint on her legs. So I took my Dremel tool and carefully sawed the legs. This means that I can go in and put the back joint. It was very scary using the Dremel because I couldn't get my hands too far away. But now we can move on to making the knee joint. do this by taking your popsicle sticks and taking your drill to go through them. This is going to be a very basic tutorial, all inspired by the work of Delightful. Again, link to her socials and stuff will be in the description below so that you can go and find everything a lot easier. But then I secured everything in place with some epoxy glue so that it wouldn't move around. I then attached 2 matching bits to the bottom of her legs, and after making sure that all of the joints fit perfectly, I took a bolt and everything works great. The joints are stiff and move properly. Now on to making the toes. To do this, I made quite a few pieces so that I could have the first part of the toe to go onto the foot and then the second part for articulation. It's like toeception over here. But once you've made sure that all of your little toe beans fit onto the popsicle stick, you can then go and start gluing them onto the feet. Take the first bit of the toe and dab some small bits of hot glue and whack it onto the feet. And then I glued on the rest of the bases. It looks a bit funky, especially more so with the rest of the toes applied, but I'm sure it'll look okay once it's all covered up with clay. It looks a bit weird, but I'm sure it'll be fine, and they're all fully articulated. The only thing I'm slightly worried about is them falling apart. But now, on to the wings. For the wings, I bought some teeny tiny hinges to try and keep them as hidden from sight as possible. The hinges, even though being really tiny, were super tough. So after nailing them into the back and attaching 2 slips of wood, I kept on trying to loosen the hinges a bit so that I would actually be able to move them. Having the added leverage of these tiny bits of wood was actually kind of helpful. It looks very weird with this popsicle stick skeleton kind of thing. It's a bit Halloween-y. Too bad that was a couple months ago. But now we can get on to fleshing everything out with some clay. I wanted to use air dry clay to keep the doll lighter, and also because epoxy sculpt is a bit expensive here in the UK, so I only use it in places where it's really needed. With all their paper clay dried, it looks pretty cool and less creepy. It'll definitely need some sanding later though. But we can now move on to making the horns. To do this, take some armature wire and stab holes into the head. This will provide grip and a base for you to sculpt your horns onto. I stabbed 4 holes and threaded a bit of wire through each of them so that I could make my crescent moon shapes for the horns. I thought having a little crescent shape with a flick at the end is a very dragon-y thing, and it's one of my favourite shapes of horn on dragons. Although you don't really see dragons with horns, it's more demons and monsters. But anyway, take your 2-part epoxy sculpt and mix it together in a 50-50 ratio to make the horns. I did end up having to mix a bit more epoxy sculpt, which I then used for the belly scales and tendons on the feet. But I think the horns look pretty cool, and I'm very happy with the way they turned out. And I even added the small little tendons on the feet, which was quite difficult. But now, onto the belly scales before the epoxy dries out. I pressed a huge chunk of it onto her belly and took a toothpick to start sculpting the little shapes. I wanted some downward facing arrows to match the spikiness of her teeth, and some patterns which I would later paint onto the wings. So I sculpted out the base shape with toothpicks, and then I took some sculpting tools to flatten it out. I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out, except for the feet, so I'm going to be breaking off all of the toes and doing it again. Hopefully more elegantly and not as bulky. But with these things, you try and you learn as you go. But with all the toes removed and all of the clay and glue and whatever there was on the feet gone, we can get on to remaking the toes. For this, I used yet another tutorial from Delightful, again, links to her channel will be in the description below, and decided to just add very little detailing with some epoxy, giving it a much more elegant and much nicer look. Now that we're all done with all the sculpting, I think it looks pretty good. With some extra clay, I made a bunch of little Candi bits and bobs and accessories that we can add to the doll later. I also made some little gumdrops, which will go on her tail. I wanted to get the mould all made now, so I made a quick silicone mould, and hoped that I mixed it all right and it would set properly. Once it had set, I chucked it in the oven for a couple hours. Some moulds don't need this, but it said on the instructions to do so. And it looks pretty nice. And then I mixed far too much resin and ended up having to fill up pretty much all of my moulds. But while all of the moulds are drying and we get all of our gumdrops for the tail, we can start priming everything we've made with gesso. This is my first time using it, but it creates a really nice base to paint on. I bought white gesso because it's the easiest for me to use because I can paint any colour on top of it and I can use it on my canvases and whatever else. And it creates a really nice chalky texture which is great, and you can layer up so many colours on top without having to do like 20 layers to build up a nice colour. Usually it would take about 4 layers to build up a nice white coat, but for this it was literally just, and it's done. Which is great. I still gave everything 2 to 3 coats to make it nice and stiff. Then I went on to the horns. One thing I really wanted to keep in the design was making the horns look like little candy canes. So I painted on the pattern, which was very hard to keep symmetrical, and filled it in with some red paint. And then we have our little candy cane horns, which is fitting because it's going to be Christmas soon. I then painted a pink gradient on her scales and feet to kind of tie in with the red from the horns, but not directly. I feel like the pink is a really nice touch, and then that means I can do a colour contrast and have some blue clothing and maybe green hair. I then added lots and lots of small little highlights and shading to the scales to really make them pop. I didn't do any on the feet because I'm not sure whether it's skin or scales or a weird transition and mix of the both, but I did on the belly scales and it looks super cute. I also painted her nails rainbow to add to the decor fashion. But now it's onto the wings. Since they looked a bit funky and a bit sticky, I decided to take my Dremel tool and sand them down to make them more curved and winged-like. And ended up looking super cool. I really liked the way it looked, but I was very afraid that they would snap and break. So, sacrificing the movability and lightness of them, I decided to take some wire armatures and glue them onto the wings and cover them in clay. Looking back on it, I kind of wish I hadn't done this because the wings are now just stuck in a downward position and very heavy. Maybe at some point I'll go and remove the clay and hope that everything doesn't break. But hey ho, you learn as you go. But now I can start adding to the wings. I sketched out a shape for the wing and took some fairy film to create them. I feel like this fairy foam works really nicely because it's got a mix of the pastel pink on the belly and some greeny blue shadows which will tie in perfectly with her outfit. And with the wings all stretched out, it looks so beautiful. I added on some white patterns and arrows to tie in the pattern on her belly scales. Unfortunately, the one bit of the popsicle stick which wasn't reinforced broke. Of course. So, after going and fixing that in the not most elegant solution, it at least stays in place, but it isn't as articulated as before, which is slightly annoying. But hey ho, the wings still look absolutely beautiful. Now we can move on to the clothes. I took a very pale blue fabric, but as I didn't want to cover up too many of the belly scales, I wanted the clothes to be quite simple, which is slightly annoying because decor fashion is usually very fun and over the top. I'll just have to make a very fun over the top decor doll at some point. But I made a simple shirt with some rainbow tassels. I felt like the tassels just added some more rainbow and decor into it. I then measured out 2 rectangles of the blue fabric to make a loincloth. I sewed around the edges and added the little hem of rainbow thread. And then I decided to go in and paint some hearts. I felt I wanted to keep the clothes quite simple to not distract from any else of it and not have it to look too overloaded. So I took my gold paint and painted it on some big hearts. I feel like the gold is just a nice standout, which looks really, really pretty. It was a bit hard to keep all of the hearts even, but with enough patience, I got there in the end. And I think it looks really cute. I did end up adding gold paint to line the shirt so that it all tied in together. Then, to the sides of the loincloth, I did 2 bottles filled with glittery resin from previous projects. And then I took all of our little candies from earlier and glued them onto chains at the side of her. It was really cute and it adds just so much detail and tiny little things, which don't distract too much from the doll. But with her outfit and accessories all done, we can move on to the next bit, the head. To start off with the head, you take your MSC sealant to add a couple coats so that you can start to build up colour. Take your chalk pastels and blush all of the main areas. Some pink on the cheeks, some darkness for the nose and eyes, and some nice rose colour on the lips. Now that she's all blushed, I can go in and add some detail with my pencils. Since her skin is quite dark, I had to go into the black pencil to start building up some eyeliner and eye shape. I wanted her to have a kind of looking to the side, slightly sly look, but still look rather happy and cutesy. Make sure to keep your pencils very sharp to get into all of the little crevices. One thing which I find very fun about Claudia's face sculpt is her teeth. I've used her sculpt once before on my Zodiac doll of Aries, and I always find the teeth the hardest to fill in to get into all of the little creases and not have them look weird. Teeth are very hard to paint in paintings and drawings, so it makes sense that painting them on a doll would also be difficult. But I go in and build up the basic eye shape, trying to keep it as sharp as possible. Unfortunately, as we're getting into colder months, there's less sun, meaning it's harder to find times that MSC will work and dry. But since it is my preferred medium and a lot easier to use for me, although some artists do amazing acrylic face-ups, I just had to keep on trying with pencils and just begging them to work. Unfortunately, the sealant ruined the face, so I had to remove it, and I ended up doing it again. I got to where we were previously, but I'm a lot more happy with the design. Sometimes if the sealant just doesn't dry right, you have to completely redo it, which is not very fun and not the best thing. But it's fine, because I was far happier with the way this one ended up turning out. I also wanted to have a little band-aid on her nose, so I did try to build that up at some points with yellow pencil. But in the end, just due to unfortunate drying circumstances, I did have to go in with acrylic paint, my worst enemy. This is the point where I had to go in with acrylics. While I don't really like using acrylics, it is very useful in some places to build up a lot brighter colour, especially if you can't get everything to dry properly. I'd usually use acrylics to add some brightness to the whites of the eyes and the eye highlights, but usually nothing besides that. But for this one, I ended up going in a lot more with acrylics. For the eyes, I decided it'd be great to have a pinky purple look, which I could really build up nicely using the acrylics. I was fighting between whether giving her pupils or not, but I decided having pupil the size is kind of cool, and would work well for a mystical Candi dragon. And with that, the face-up is done. I ended up not liking the band-aid, so I did remove it using some acetone. But besides that, I think the face-up is super cute. Glossing dolls is one of my favourite things because it just makes it look so shiny and cute. I love using the Liquitex matte gloss varnish because it's just so shiny and so bright. But now, onto the hair. I brushed out some minty blue-green yarn and decided to mix the colour to go on her head to add some base. I didn't have too much of the yarn because it was left over from an old ball, so I was just trying desperately to make it go far enough to cover the entire head. Styling hair is something which is very difficult to record with my camera setup. But with it all styled and all curled, it looks super cute. To curl it, I took a heated chopstick and curled some hair around it and held it in place until it was all heated up and the chopstick cooled. And then you have your perfect little curl. She looks super cute now. Now to attach the head to the body. I was very careful because I didn't want to scratch any of the paint, crack the face up or anything. But it all went great. We've still got to make the tail. Now that all of the resin bits are dried, we can get on to making it. I measured out the length in a bunch of small little gumdrops, which I made. I then painted all of the fabric to match. Painting all the scales on the fabric took forever. But I then folded it in half and sewed it down, and threaded my piece of armature wire for the tail through. It bends really nicely, although the fabric does crimp up in a couple places. I think it still looks pretty cool. And with all the gumdrops on, it looks super cute. Except for the fact that they kept on falling off. But with it all attached and everything looking super cute, we are now actually done. I'm so happy with how she turned out. I love her look and her aesthetic. And for her name, I decided, since she is a Candi Decora dragon, to call her Candi. I'm so happy with how she turned out. And I just feel like her wings match her entire look with her hair and the pink scales and everything. It's just, so cute. Unfortunately, due to the weather not being very nice over the past week, I haven't been able to get too many good photos of her. So there's only a couple, which is unfortunate. But thank you guys all so much for watching. This doll was a real joy to make, and I honestly want to do more dolls like this in the future. Maybe not dragons, but Decora dolls and dolls with a lot of body articulation. But remember, if you enjoyed the video, please do like, share, and maybe subscribe. Make sure to go and check out all of the art materials listed and check out Delightful's channel. But thank you guys all so much for watching, and I shall see you all in the next video. Bye!